Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cichetti.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast, where we really highlight leaders in our green building movement. I'm excited today to talk to an Atlanta colleague and friend, Lauren Wallace. Lauren, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go back. We share an alma mater together, but even before college, where'd you grow up? Then tell us a little bit about college, and then I want to follow up with, how'd you get into sustainability? Like, did you have something that just flipped the switch? But where'd you grow up and then go to college?
So originally from Long Beach, California. Grew up mostly in San Diego. Had family still in the LA area, so spent a lot of time between LA and San Diego. Moved to Atlanta in 1993, so I've officially been here a lot longer. Actually originally located in Alpharetta. We were only there for a couple months, did not really care for the area. And at the time, Gwinnett County was, I think it was like the largest growing county in the entire U.S. or something. Yeah. So moved to Gwinnett County, went to Collinsville High School, spent a lot of time in the suburbs. And my dad's from the South. He grew up in Tennessee. So even in California, I, had a lot of the Southern upbringing.
Sure.
So it wasn't too strange to be here and have family in Tennessee. And
that probably, when you were in the suburbs, because I know you now and you live in town. So it was interesting that you grew up there, but maybe you knew when you wanted to raise your family, you wanted to be in town.
Yeah, my mom, she always says, do you hate the suburbs because that's where we lived? And I was like, no, not mostly. That's a whole nother story as to why I like being in a city. But in high school, I either wanted to do something in the medical field, and then, I knew that's what I was going to do. Everything I did was, biology based, and I became a lifeguard. I'm like first responder certified, obsessed with all of it. My mom is a nurse. So I was like, yes, this is definitely what I'm doing. I did some rotations in the hospital, but I knew I wanted to be a radiologist after that. And then my last semester of my senior year, I needed some additional courses, and they have this drafting course. And I was the only girl in the class. Okay. And it was the first time I kind of really looked into architecture and drawing and kind of the more creative side of my brain. My brother is an artist. He works in the film industries. And I remember first year of architecture school bringing home some, I don't know, they always joke that the first year of architecture school is basically like art. And I brought home some drawings and some sketches and some charcoals. And my mom was like, I had no idea you were so creative. And I was like, thanks, Mom.
That's fun.
But yeah, I think it just kind of opened up my brain to an industry where everything, when it's science and math, there's an answer. There's always an answer. And doing something in the design field was, it tickled my brain in different ways because you're never done. You have to be done, right? You have to stop at a certain point because you ran out of time. And things have to be turned in and there's due dates. And, even after you leave that project, architects carry around, sketchbooks to sketch things that they see, but it's also sometimes to just doodle what's in their head, because they're still morphing that design. They're still exploring it. And that was really exciting to me. But my father is blue collar and he's a millwright, which there aren't a lot of millwrights in the world, but his father actually built houses from the ground up. So I didn't have a close relationship with him. His parents were older because he was kind of like a oops baby. He's 12 years there's 12 years of separation between him and his sister. So,
wow.
so I didn't really know that, but I guess it's not strange to have
it was in the genes,
engineering,
yeah.
mindset and things like that. So that I still, when I applied for colleges, I applied all over the place. I kind of thought that what would happen is I would get accepted to some and denied by others, and then that would help make my decision.
Yeah.
So I applied to some as pre-med and some for architecture, and got into everything. And then I think for whatever reason, when the application packet from Georgia Tech came, or when the acceptance package, I guess, came in the mail, I just knew Georgia Tech.
Architecture, done that way.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. We were at Georgia Tech about the same time. Was there any sustainability talk then, or no? Focused on, design and going through the core curriculum.
A little bit, not a lot.
Sure.
Not like today.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sat on, in studio critiques and been a juror for an entire master's studio that focused on living building challenge, which was never something that they even dreamed of when we were there. But my junior year, actually, we went to Serenbe before Serenbe existed, and met, he's kind of the owner, but really he's like the president of all of his friends, where he said, let's start a trust and not sell off all of our property to suburban developers. So I think it was a great idea. We literally walked in the woods. He took us to where he wanted the center of town to be, and said he wanted people to be able to see this eternal burning flame. And then everything, with the idea of everything being kind of like these little hamlets, like a horseshoe, like they are in Europe, where the very center of the horseshoe is the dense, urban center, and then everything spreading out from that all the way to little farms and things that you, and some artist lofts and things like that. And now it's adult second homes that are in the multi-million dollars. So it's the dream and the idea.
The reality, yeah.
I think was not lost on me when we were doing the project. A really good friend of mine who's no longer living actually he built his entire model out of recycled materials.
Okay.
And the professors did not like it, and I loved it. I was obsessed. I was like, it's genius. It's exactly what we should all be doing. I mean, why not, right? So I think there were some projects in particular that kind of pushed those buttons. But I mean, there was not a lot of connection from studio to the real world. And at about that time, it was the, birth of the lead rating system and, BREEAM in the UK. I mean, it's been around since, I think they started talking about it in the 80s and 92, 91, I think. And then LEED was, or USGBC was 98 here. So, I think I'm not surprised that as soon as I graduated is when I kind of started to explore some more of that. But I'm a little upset that it wasn't
like it is today. You're right. It's good to see some of the universities that are really doing it today. So Serenbe, for those who don't know, I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's a sustainable community about an hour west of Atlanta, and you can see some of the good. And,
I think it's 35 miles. It's really not far at all. And it's, I mean, I have friends that go there all the time. They love it a lot. There are some pretty prominent people in the sustainability realm who design residential, and especially they have a really renowned landscape architect. And this is where you should be interviewing my husband, because I don't remember people's names. I just remember that they're important, and he remembers everyone's name. But yeah, I think it's a great way to walk around a neighborhood and see some more of the traditional landscape, native landscape. They use a lot of concepts like French drains and things that are that people can actually incorporate in their own homes if they're trying to, be more sustainable and things like that.
Funny story. A few years ago, they had the HGTV green home there.
Yeah, they
We took a day trip, and I brought some of my team who does energy audits and commissioning, and they were just calling them out because they had some incandescent lights and they didn't have LED, and they're running this. And but there's what we show on TV. But no, across the board though, very sustainable community. They're trying to pioneer something there, and there's some good examples.
They have lots of things happening all the time. They like do plays.
It's pretty cool.
Horseback riding.
They have their own school and garden and community center. So got out of Georgia Tech, and then you worked in some historic preservation, did some early lead consulting before you got to Epsten. So tell us about that.
I worked while I was in school, like the whole time. But
that's good.
After going back to why I don't live in the suburbs, through Georgia Tech, lived in Paris for a year. Nice. Didn't have a car, walked everywhere. Used an amazing metro system that, just makes sense. Things like that. So when I came back to the U.S., I said, I really wanted to change way of living. And of course, as soon as I moved back, I have no money because I haven't been working and I've been outside of, and I'm living with my parents in Lawrenceville and working in College Park. And one day it took me 3 hours to get home. And I was like on the side of the road, just like bawling. And my mom's like, just get home. Like, we all sit through this. I don't understand why you're so upset. And I'm like, because I didn't want to do this. So I changed everything. I, went small, spent a lot of money, moved in town, and said, I will always be close to my office. So even friends who moved to Sandy Springs, their office is in Sandy Springs. I'm like, it makes sense. Why live here when your office is in Sandy Springs? I mean, it's half your life. So sure
that time in France must have had an influence on you. Just, you're right, your footprint, your living, quality of life, and then sure, sustainability. And so let's talk about some of the programs you're working in, because you've spent most of your career and now you're a principal here at Epsten Group. So for those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Epsten Group?
So Epsten Group is really a consulting company. Our origin is a traditional architecture design company, but over the years, the former owner, she was German, and she's been in the States for more than 35 years now. But when she started practicing architecture, especially in the Southeast, she didn't understand why people didn't incorporate daylight. Why do you not pick the most efficient windows? I mean, this is what we do in Europe, So she started really kind of pushing for sustainability, and about the same time, USGBC was rolling forward. She helped write some of the original content for the first reference guides, things like that. So she was always seen as a sustainability face, especially in the Southeast. And people who don't know, the Southeast is a little bit of a bear and sometimes hard to push in certain directions. I mean, not to mention our utilities are pretty cheap here, so it's hard to convince people to spend a lot of money on things that will make you more efficient when it just doesn't cost that much to operate a building. Well, it didn't then. Things are definitely changing. But yeah, so over the years, we just kind of started to find more of a niche in the sustainability market and started designing things that were sustainable, did a lot of consulting, and now we have a commissioning department. So, a lot of our clients that we work with, and I'm sure, it's similar for you, they aren't necessarily sustainability minded. They just know that commissioning makes sense because they want their building to be as efficient as possible on the day that it begins operation. And we still do design, but most of the design that we focus on is zoo architecture, which is fun and probably like a whole separate podcast.
There you go.
And then also K through 12 schools. So still do a lot of consulting, but as far as design, we also do a lot of things like roofing and waterproofing and building envelope commissioning and envelope consulting and things like that. So it's still architecture and design, but it's really like these very like niche things. And some of what we do, like the testing and whatnot, kind of goes back to my roots in historic preservation, which to me is like the original sustainability. And I don't think I ever answered this question, but that's a lot of how I got into sustainability. Some of my first clients at big architecture companies were Whole Foods and IKEA, and they were already starting to incorporate some things. They like Whole Foods had an entire area for composting, and I'm a total nerd, and I loved it. I loved it all. Cool. I wanted to know how it worked. I'm like, why doesn't every business have this? Why doesn't the city have it? And at the time, San Francisco had also rolled out, like, the entire city was going to start collecting compost, and I was like, this is so inspiring. So I think that's just kind of how we've grown. It's we're about 60 people, headquartered in Atlanta. We have a few people spread throughout the U.S. We have someone in Massachusetts, Oregon, Jacksonville, Florida. We have someone in Savannah. We have branches of people, but not offices elsewhere. And I think just the way that the business works these days is, as long as you're connected to the internet, you can work wherever.
Yeah. No, you're right. But we happen to be sitting in your LEED Platinum, double platinum office here in downtown Atlanta. So you did a major renovation of this building, right? LEED New Construction Major Renovations Platinum, and then took it for EBOM version 4 Platinum. So congrats. And even some Green Globes, I think I saw downstairs too. So
Green Globes.
You're practicing what you preach. No, Lauren, very cool office, growing the team. And I've known you for a while, but I think you've been a key partner to growing LEED, not just, the architecture side, the consulting, the commissioning, but you also help advocate for the third-party certifications and doing the LEED reviews to supplement GBCI. And so I know you've had a lot of experience there over the years. So I think it's awesome. I've got to ask about some credentials in a minute, but let's go back. Mentors along the way. You've got an awesome career here. You're principal here at Epsten, and you're the director of certifications and consulting. But, were there any people along the way that gave you a nudge towards sustainability or just had an influence on you?
It's kind of interesting because the architecture and I think building industry in general is very male dominated. So I've had some pretty fantastic mentors over the years who have actually been men pushing women forward. Yeah, exactly. But really, I think when I think about it, it goes back to my mom. She owned her own company.
Cool.
She's headed entire divisions of companies. She started entire divisions of companies, and at the same time raised 2 kids, and did things like the 3-hour drive in traffic for work and to get home to the kids. And I think her work ethic and my father's work ethic went a long way in inspiring me. And I'm not young, but I'm not old, and I think it's kind of crazy to be a principal of a company at this age. But I think, the first person I called and said, okay, so I have this opportunity, was my mom.
Cool.
Because she's been there. She's done all of that. And of course, she comes at it with the, you're a mom now too, and, work-life balance. And I think that's the millennial generation there's been a turn towards work-life balance, I think, because we watched our parents do all of this, right? Bend over backwards to give us everything and also have a career and try and keep up with the Joneses. So I think my mom would definitely be someone. But actually one of my other partners here, Bill D'Onofrio, has been a fantastic mentor, especially in the managing people aspect, because that's not something they teach in school. And I think one of the things that I experienced being in the architecture industry at the beginning of my career was that people become managers because they've been there for a long time.
By default,
and they have, not necessarily because they're good at managing people. So I very quickly kind of realized that if this was what I was going to do, then I wanted to do it well, or as well as I can. Obviously, I'm sure anybody that's ever worked for me would say that I have good days and bad days. Who doesn't, right? But I think that's he's been a fantastic mentor in that aspect. And he owned his own company at one point too. So I think he's been super.
Yeah, and the difference between management and leadership and that teeter-totter. But no, Lauren, you're an inspiration, not just for women in sustainability, but women in business. So I really think you have that business stack. It's awesome.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I try.
It's hard work, 60 people. Let's talk about some of your proudest achievements to date. What stands out?
Oh gosh. So when I worked for the largest architecture company that I ever worked for, they had multiple offices nationwide, like a couple hundred employees. Yeah. I went to them and I said, hey, there's this thing called LEAD, and I think that we have some clients that would be really interested in it. They're already doing some things that are like, kind of like this. And I remember one particular person literally said, oh, you silly little girl, it's just a bandwagon thing. Oh, no. And I love seeing those people today at industry events, because I'm like, yeah, I own a company, and that's all we do is that silly little bandwagon thing. And I think, I have people all the time who say, well, like sustainability, it's just going to be incorporated into like the building codes, and it's going to be like just what we do. But as well as I know, that every month it feels like there's something new, and we are all still learning, and we don't have the answers. And there's things like there are other countries trying to get a handle on this, and I feel like they're already more progressive than we are and things like that. So there's always someone to learn from. And I think so some of my proudest achievements, I think, would be just staying on top of all of it, and also seeing something that I was super passionate about and knowing that it had legs.
That's a good segue for the fact that your email signature is longer than mine, and I thought I had a pretty good one.
It's embarrassing. Well, no, now you have to get more so that I'm not the only person.
We talked about true. I'm going to go for true, but why all of these? BREEAM end-use assessor, Fitwell ambassador, ParkSmart advisor, True advisor. Some would argue, Lauren, that those programs are just new and there's not a lot of people doing it yet, and why versus LEAD and WELL and your WELL faculty. Why stay out in front of all of these? I think you've got them all covered, actually.
Is there one that I'm missing?
I don't know. Let's make one together.
Yeah. Actually, there is one I'm missing, and Dave Whittick would tell you that I'm missing it all the time. But we'll talk about that later. So, in one aspect, people have always looked to Epsten Group as being at the forefront and looking to us to help lead the way. And what is new, keeping ahead of the market and being able to tell them, we know that you want to fit into this envelope, and here are all of your options, and really helping them make the business case for what makes the most sense. Because there are so many organizations and developers and buildings and projects and things out there that are doing everything that all of these rating systems cover and more, and they're not actually going for any sort of certification. So I have always felt like I am a better manager if I'm a little bit in the trenches.
Absolutely.
And I, can't sit in front of clients and in front of project teams and owners and developers and say, this is what makes the most sense for you, unless I actually know what I'm talking about. So that's a part of having all of those accreditations, is really just deep diving and getting to know what the focus is. What is the end game here? What is, the goal? I mean, anybody can go on to like the Fitwell website and kind of scroll through it and, download the reference guide and see what is it all about. But if someone's looking at doing Fitwell certification versus WELL certification, I need to be able to tell them which is going to be better for you, which makes the most sense from a business case, not just because this one's like the most popular or this one will get you the most PR or, like all those things.
Lots of options. I second, though, what you said about being in the trenches. So if you want to ask someone to do something, it helps if you've done it before, could do it alongside them, or maybe they know they could come to you with questions, because you actually might look at it a little differently. So I totally second that thought. Absolutely. Is when you're asking someone to do something, if you've never done it before, there's just not as much respect there for that. don't get me wrong, I've got some awesome engineers that do some advanced retro commissioning on big buildings. And while I might not be able to do all of that,
right.
I know enough to do some damage.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, you have to be able to speak their language. You have to be able to understand what their hurdles are going to be. And I think you gain more respect as a manager when you are able to say, I have no idea what I'm doing, but we're going to do it together. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there.
That's good. So lots and lots of credentials. I told you I'm going to go after true next for myself. Projects that you can talk about. What are one or two that stand out that maybe you're working on now? If you can talk about them. I know here in Atlanta, Epsten has done a lot of good sustainability work, even on some of our recent large projects. So, but what's keeping you busy today?
There are a lot of projects that we're working on that are applying multiple rating systems, which is, as a nerd and a lover of everything sustainable, it's inspiring. So, those are the things that whenever you're inspired, I think, and you have a little bit of heart in it, that's what burns the midnight oil. So it's easy to stay busy with those things, but it's also a lesson in trying to tackle like multiple fronts, really, and also trying to help the people who work for me as consultants tackle that, and like what's the most efficient way to do it, and things like that. So I think a couple of the ones that I can talk about, the Grant Park parking deck, which is a project that is
at the Atlanta Zoo. Well,
in Grant Park, right. Historic Grant Park, designed originally by Olmsted. But there are two surface lots, and one of the surface lots is going to become a parking deck. It was designed by Smith Dahlia with some really cool applications, because there's a lot of grade changes from Boulevard down Jackson to Cherokee. Yeah. Did I get that right?
I think so.
But then the surface of the parking deck will actually just be green space and some public space. And I don't know if I'm sure you've been to the Grant Park Farmers Market that happens on Sundays, but it'll be expanded to over there as well. Awesome. So they are applying Park Smart to the parking deck itself. On the top of the deck will be a small little corn shell space for a restaurant. And that is attempting LEED corn shell version 4. And then we're also applying sites to the entire project. And the construction of it is coinciding with the Atlanta Zoo expanding into the cyclorama, which is also something that we're working on. Or again, zoo architecture. But I think that project in itself is really exciting. Sites is something we've never worked with, but we've just kind of been a part of and trying to promote for a while. And super excited that the city is, jumping in with us. And I think it'll be a great story to tell how all three were applied. And I think, for anybody that's in the industry and who's done a lot of this before, there's you have to figure out your project boundaries. And
that's tough down there.
There have been a lot of conference calls with GBCI because they don't really know how to do this either. They're like, yeah, okay, well, my silo is Park Smart and this person's silo is LEED, but like a meeting of the minds and like, how does this make sense in the real world? And things like that, because like the Park Smart uses ASHRAE 62.1 for ventilation, and so does LEED, but they have different requirements.
Okay. One
is let's ventilate the parking deck because parking deck, and it's part of it's underground, and then LEED is like, well, there's people in here.
So now you need.
Yeah, and it's literally a cold dark shell, so we have very little control over what's being set up, other than the systems that are being supplied for whoever will go into that space. So
fun project, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a little crazy. And as we're moving through it, some more exciting things have, like, they just announced that if you earn site certification for an area, then you will earn all of the site selection credits and LEED. So we're like, oh, check all those boxes. Okay. That's just less documentation.
Streamlined path.
So things like that. And then another project that we're working on is, and we'll be speaking about it next week at Greenville, Mexico, is the Interface Kyle 2 manufacturing facility in LaGrange, Georgia. So Interface they've deep dived into sustainability. They do some really, really cool stuff. But they've also really kind of started to spearhead the health and wellness aspect that has been brought into sustainability. And they're doing it with their headquarter office that is moving to Midtown Atlanta with a really cool project. I don't know how much you know about that. Doing some really fun, I love working on projects with integral engineering, and it's a goal of mine to understand how Stanton Stafford convinces owners to install chilled beams and things like that. So they'll have some passive systems, and they're collecting a lot of water in their parking deck and things like that. So that's a really cool project, but they're applying WELL and LEAD to that, and they're applying WELL and LEAD to the manufacturing facility. And it's been an adventure for us in multiple aspects. One, applying both the rating systems and using the crosswalks, which are just genius. But then also applying WELL, which was born for a office space, much like LEAD, and applying it to a space that is warehouse, manufacturing, and office. So we've been working pretty closely with IWBI using their All Projects In platform. And because of that, we have meetings with other people who are applying it to manufacturing spaces. One of the things that, in the process of making carpet, they store nylon string and nylon off-gases. And for the WELL rating system, VOC content at certain levels is something that will be measured in the space. And we're like, okay, great. So how do we mitigate that in the warehouse? Because they're going to come in and they're going to capture air samples. But then, what's been fantastic doing this with Interface is that they already know all those levels. They've already studied them all. They've done all of their own air testing because they've cared about that and they've known about that for years and years and years. And they know that their employees spend all of this time in those spaces. So it's been interesting meeting, more than just the project team who's a part of developing the building. You're also meeting some of the scientists that work for them that are on just the product side, and they're like, well, all I know is carpet. But let me tell you all of the studies we've done and all of the things that we know. So that's been a really interesting project, and we'll talk about it at Greenville because I've talked about crosswalks before. They asked me to talk about crosswalks the day that they released the WELL and the crosswalk, and I was like, thanks guys. Yeah. No problem, got this. But I think it's been almost 2 years, and it's only been a year since the crosswalks have been out, but I'm excited to talk about it from a realistic, this is how it was applied standpoint. And I've listened to other people talk about it and say, well, I think you should do this first. And, I have a good friend who just took the Delos office through multiple certifications, and she still hasn't applied for LEED certification, even though she has all the documentation. That's what she's doing last. And I just think it's interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I would have done first.
No, and for those listening, I think the crosswalks are great to look into more, but just hopefully you're hearing that with these rating systems, they are changing, but if you have a project that's proactive that really wants to get there, you can contact the authorities here and brainstorm, and let's find a way when you have client like an Interface or something like that. We got to get there. What's around the corner? If you put on, if you look into the crystal ball, where do you think sustainability, green buildings are shifting next? Some others have said, of course, wellness, resiliency, but who knows? Where do you think we should be reading up now? What's coming?
Total embodied carbon.
Cool.
I have sat in a few seminars that it's probably the same for you. We go to these different conferences, and a lot of it's for networking and also staying in touch with our peers, and you want to sit in on sessions and know, like, what are people doing? What is the future like? And for a few years there, it was like, wait, I know more than the people that were, giving this presentation. And it starts to get a little disheartening, but then you sit in some, and when people like us walk away from it and like our minds are blown, I think it resonates. And I think that the way that we design is going to change, and it has to. But, my brain also thinks of the business aspect, which is like that's a lot of time, and that's going to be a lot more expensive. And I don't know how we're going to convince people that the cost for this is going to cost that much. And the rating systems that we work with now are trying to incorporate it. And, kind of going back a little bit to like, people using aspects from the rating systems, but maybe not applying for certification. The reason that we look to rating systems is because they are helping push that bar. And, LEED has always done a great job of riding that supply and demand line. Whereas, we work with Living Building Challenge, and that's, shooting for the moon. Like, of course, that's where we should all be, right? Like net positive water and energy, and, like completely off the grid and able to sustain everything that we need to operate within our own space. But it's just hard and not necessarily reality. And then, like you're leaving out like existing buildings and like all these things, right? So I think what is going to happen is you will look at a project, where it's based, the region, what's happening in terms of like whether it's previously developed or greenfield site, and you will have a list of these are the materials that give us the least amount of embodied carbon as far as the design. A lot of carbon study is focused heavily on the structural components in the envelope, because that's the most material, right? And it makes the most sense. But I think it will come down to as small as like what kind of carpet are you installing, and where did that come from, and what's the total life cycle for it. But I sat in a seminar from Skanska, from their Sweden office, and they looked at embodied carbon from 3 different aspects. The first was the business case for them in terms of investors and things like that. And then also project design. And it was, I think what completely blew my mind was coming from the design, world, knowing like, well, the first thing we do is look at local building codes.
Sure.
And talk to the owner and like, what do you want? And this surpasses all of that, and it completely changes like the steps and the way that we do it. So you'll be given basically a list of here are the materials that you can use, and we should aim for these amounts. And then you'll do that. You'll design the building, and it's kind of like a lot of back and forth with the person who's doing the whole building life cycle assessment and the designer. And say, like cross-laminated timber is a great choice, but you're building a natatorium. Okay, too much humidity. We need to switch out some of the materials. Like, okay, well, if you're going to add more concrete and steel and glass here, then we need to make up for it to still get back to like net zero carbon. And so how do we morph the rest of the design? And it's
one thing to do an energy model, but in that case, the total carbon equation, it sounds like they had a different box of Legos to build out of.
Yeah, it's cool. Completely different. Yeah, so I truly think that is the future, because when it comes to sustainability and looking at climate change, and like my world is like all these rating systems and all these different things, and it's similar for you. We still need to be able to compare apples to apples, and we all need to like be able to get to, we all have the same goal, but whatever your world is that you're in every day, you are having to focus on that one thing. The only thing that we can all collectively look at and start speaking the same language is carbon emissions. So I think
that's what's next. You heard it here first. I can see you're passionate about it. No, you're. Just a few more questions. What do you think's your specialty? What's your gift so far in your career?
I've been grateful to have the gift of knowing someone's personality and their end goals, like within the first 5 minutes of meeting them. And I think that has saved my butt and helped me get further and helped me adapt to, clients, employees, in interviews, like making the right decision, like for who you're going to hire. Do I want to connect myself to this person? Do I want to be friends with this person? Is this person really a mentor? Like, are they helping me and I'm helping them? Like kind of quid pro quo kind of stuff. I think.
So you can read people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a gift. No, it's a gift. I feel like I can read people too, but yeah, you have to look for it. I think some people don't even look for the body language, the mannerisms, the eye contact. You're right. Just the energy levels. Is this one-sided or is it going to be a win-win so you can read people?
Yeah. And I think, a lot of what we do in like management training is, like there's all the personality tests and personality studies. And I'm like, oh, I don't apply like that language to them, but yeah, that makes sense, that kind of thing. So I think just in interacting with people, I know that there are so many people that don't tune into that. And I think it's helpful.
That's awesome. Just a couple more. You have a few minutes. Routines. Do you have any daily routines, rituals that help you be successful, Lauren? You mentioned you walk to work, sometimes listen to a podcast, but hint, hint, Green Building Matters podcast. But what other routines, rituals? What helps you?
I think it's really important to get into your own headspace. And, some people meditate and like some people, like I have a friend that I used to run with a lot. And then that person stopped running for a little while and I kept running and realized that I liked being in my own head. It's like time for my brain to work through all those things. Some people do it in the shower,
Sure.
And like kind of zone out. Some people do it driving into work, that kind of thing. I think you always have to take a moment to collect yourself and let your brain work through all of that. But I am a big advocate of making lists and checking them off.
Feels good, right? Momentum.
Yeah, we use Microsoft and Outlook, and people in the office would tell you like one of my favorite things to do is like check that red flag. Check it off. Nice. I feel panic when things turn red, and I like having an empty inbox.
Okay.
I have folders for everything because if it's in my inbox, that means it needs attention. So
that's awesome. Good tips. I'm a fan of the bucket list. I have a large bucket list. What are one or two things on your bucket list? Could be personal or travel or something with the family. It could be work, but what's on your bucket list?
I really enjoyed travel. Always have.
Cool.
And I think I'd like to spend some more time on the other side of the world. I went to Hong Kong last year and visited a friend before he and his wife were moving because they lived there for 7 years. And I was like, it's always nice to have your own personal tour guide.
Sure.
But I think, like Seoul and Singapore and Japan and like Australia and New Zealand, I'd like to check some of those off the list because life is so different over there. And it's always, I get invigorated seeing other ways of life and things like that, getting outside of our own little box. And what else for a bucket list? I like seeing other people succeed and passing on the torch. So I think I'd like to bring on associates and continue to mentor people and, things like that. Continue to grow the company and, a little bit selfish, but grow myself. Continue to gain knowledge and
keep learning. Get more credentials. Yeah. No, that's good. We have a global audience, so I'm sure some listening in Southeast Asia can appreciate you wanting to travel there more. That's great.
Yeah.
Two more books. Maybe you listen, maybe you read, but any books you'd recommend to those listening? Doesn't have to be business. It's anybody, anything.
So the best nonfiction that I read recently was Drawdown, edited by Paul Hawken, and I'm not going to remember the senior collaborator's name, but Catherine. Anyways, it was on my list. I thought it was something I'd get to later, but I think for anybody listening, even if you're not necessarily tied to this industry. It is so well written that, it's like I think everybody close to me is getting a copy for Christmas. It's beautiful. It's kind of this awkward, like coffee table size book, but everyone should have it on their coffee table because it's
the top 100 ways that we can reverse climate change, essentially, right?
Yeah, and I think as someone who's always amazed by like how resilient humans are, and the environment is, and things like that, and nerding out about like biomimicry and things like that, they look to things that already exist, not like, oh, we need someone to invent something that will take care of this. It's like, no, these are things we already do. And this is how much we need, and this is how much we need to do in order to reverse that. And it was mind-opening from, I think, a different perspective than what we deal with every day.
And for those that haven't, we'll put the link below. It's so funny you mentioned that book. We're reading it right now as a company, and we're going to be discussing it at our retreat in a couple weeks. But one of my colleagues is having her first child. And so she really resonated with what do women and children, what's their impact on this on global warming,
huge impact,
and climate change.
Yeah. So. Women and educating women is in like the top 10 things that we can do, which is amazing. And then I think from like, I'm also a part of a book club, have been for years, and there's quite a few fiction books that have been entertaining recently. Like I just finished The Husband's Secret, Leanne Moriarty, who also wrote Big Little Lies, and then Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which was really entertaining. And then before that, Little Fires Everywhere.
Cool. You can go back and forth, nonfiction, fiction. That's good. My wife is fiction. A couple books a week, and I'm over here on the nonfiction side. But I'll check some of those out.
No, it's the same in my family. When you do like technical writing and stuff all day, sometimes you have your
business,
you
entrepreneurship.
Have to be in the fiction.
Last question. This has been so much fun. Just any advice for someone that maybe is jumping into this green building movement? Maybe they're early in their career, or maybe later in a career, they're like, you know what, this sustainability thing, I've got the bug. I want to do something in this green building movement, the sustainability movement.
Yeah, we need help. Get out of school and work instead. You don't need all of those degrees. You need experience. Learn the fine art of 3 cups of tea. I think we always joke in the Southeast that it's who you know, not what you know. But I've found that is true throughout the entire globe. Not a lot of people, will throw all their eggs in your basket after they meet you for the first time. So you have to, it's 3 cups of tea. It's just it's a concept that they have elsewhere in the world, but it may take multiple meetings, and you don't want to burn bridges in that first meeting, and don't expect someone to give you everything that you need in that first meeting. So 3 cups of tea, and take a break. Enjoy life, and travel outside of the U.S. and within the U.S. Get outside your bubble.
That's awesome. This has been a lot of fun. I'm proud of you and what you're doing here at Epsten, but also with the industry, especially on a national and international level. So keep up the good work. Keep growing the team. I know we'll compare notes on what's around the corner and business, but thanks for being on the Green Building Matters podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode, and you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.